Alfred Hitchcock, Martin Scorsese, Akira Kurosawa. These names are all synonymous with greatness. But what if you could only pick one? What if you had to pick who the greatest film director of all time was? Could you even do that? There's absolutely no way you can pick one greatest director. No way. Okay, hater, then watch me. Even if you're not into basketball, you've probably stumbled around this question. Who is the greatest of all time? Michael Jordan or LeBron James? When discussing greatness, it can be challenging because there's a lot of nuance that surrounds it. Because greatness isn't just one thing. But the beauty about discussing greatness when it comes to sports is that there's tangible evidence. In fact, you could break it up into 3 separate categories. But with film directors, they're not judged based on points, rebounds, assists, or whatever. In fact, you're more likely to find a director courtside than actually on a basketball court. But our challenge today is to use that criteria in order to determine who the greatest film director of all time is. And believe it or not, it actually translates over pretty well. One of the most valuable things to look at is their longevity and productivity in the filmmaking industry. Legends like Ingmar Bergman, Agnes Varda, Alfred Hitchcock, and Akira Kurosawa each sustained remarkable careers that spanned over 5 decades, maintaining a consistently high standard of quality in their work. In fact, many would argue that even some of their late-stage stuff was some of their best, because they curated years and years of experience and really chipped away at their craft. By the way, I'm one of those people that argue this. Late-stage Kurosawa? GOAT. Well, not maybe. Who knows? Another director who is in this category is Martin Scorsese. His most recent films, The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon, are a culmination of themes he's been discussing for decades. Even Spielberg, for example, is in a more reflective state of his career. He's still evolving and doing new things, like with West Side Story, doing a musical for the first time, but also The Fabelmans, his long-awaited autobiographical film that he waited until he was in his 70s to make. Yet it's also essential to note that sustained output over time, while impressive, doesn't automatically equate to being the greatest. For instance, Orson Welles aspired to create films until his death, yet he faced constant challenges in securing funding and completing projects. This struggle limited the quantity of his work, but elevated the quality of what he did manage to release. Stanley Kubrick is kind of in the same category. Though he didn't really struggle to get films made, the movies that he did make took years to complete. He was best known for his meticulous research and his perfectionism. But the significance of his projects are completely undeniable, with 2001 standing out as a landmark in cinematic history. Then there's filmmakers like Andrei Tarkovsky, whose careers were tragically cut short. The films he crafted, such as Stalker and Mirror, are considered masterpieces that continue to resonate with its audiences. Chantal Akerman, whose film Jean Dielman recently topped the Sight and Sound Critics poll, also exemplifying how a smaller body of work can leave a lasting impact on cinematic history. Discussing the awards a director has received isn't really a fair assessment of greatness. While the Academy Awards are important to the American filmmaking community, that's exactly the problem. They're too American. The Academy Awards don't really showcase global cinema. A more insightful approach to this is to look at the Sight and Sound list, which provides a critical consensus over time. In the Greatest Directors of All Time poll conducted in 2002, critics place Orson Welles at the top, closely followed by Alfred Hitchcock and Jean-Luc Godard. Similarly, the director's top 10 poll from that same year champions Welles as the greatest director, followed by Fellini and Kurosawa. Now fast forward to the 2022 Sight and Sound list, which welcomed Chantal Akerman. Her film Jean Dielman took the top spot on the critics list, dethroning Vertigo and Citizen Kane, which had dominated the list since its inception. Hitchcock still had a resounding 6 films in the top 250, followed closely by Stanley Kubrick, who had 5. Ultimately, I think this list does a better job at determining the final product, the ultimate craftsmanship that goes into a film, rather than just focusing on the number of awards a director has won. The Sight and Sound list provides a broader, more inclusive look at filmmaking excellence. Now, the legacy a filmmaker leaves behind is undoubtedly the most critical aspect of this entire discussion. A single film from a director can inspire students of cinema far more than a 50-decade career, which of course makes this conversation a pretty complex one. Every great director has profoundly impacted filmmaking. Take Orson Welles, for example. He revolutionized storytelling with Citizen Kane in 1941, employing techniques like deep focus and nonlinear narrative. Welles redefined what a film could be through his experimental cinematography, and since its release, it has been hailed as the greatest film ever made. Then there's Alfred Hitchcock, whose mastery of suspense in films like Psycho and Vertigo introduced new methods for manipulating tension on screen. The groundbreaking work of Stanley Kubrick is equally undeniable. His ability to push boundaries across genres, whether it's the cold satire of Dr. Strangelove or the epic scope of 2001: A Space Odyssey, this set the standard for genre filmmaking. Then you have Steven Spielberg. He's often credited with creating the movie blockbuster, but this fact alone kind of undersells his greatness. While his contributions to the filmmaking business are absolutely undeniable, I believe that it's him and Akira Kurosawa who are the absolute masters at creating visually impactful compositions. Then, of course, if we go even further back, there's the great pioneers from the earlier decades like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, who laid the groundwork for comedy and physical storytelling. Then there's Francis Ford Coppola.
So go back to the club.
Not only created two of the greatest American films ever made in The Godfather and Godfather Part 2, but he also changed the way that we use sound design in his films like The Conversation and Apocalypse Now. Now, all these filmmakers have crafted significant legacies, but who is the greatest? If we had to choose just one, who would it be? Well, I kind of already told you. There's absolutely no way you can pick one greatest director. I might have buried the lead a little bit on that one. Okay, here's the thing. I do have one person that I was able to land on, and I will reveal who that is in just a moment. I just felt like it was dishonest to myself to land on one greatest director. And that is because what is the GOAT debate if not a debate? I mean, that's one thing that we've discussed over the course of this entire video is greatness itself is kind of subjective. My favorite directors of all time, which I talked about on this list, are people like Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, and Orson Welles. In my mind, not only are they in the greatest of all time conversation, but just because I believe that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the greatest. Now, the three finalists I was able to come up with this criteria were the following: Stanley Kubrick, Orson Welles, and Alfred Hitchcock. These three directors, in my opinion at least, have had the greatest impact on cinema. Their greatest works and even some of their lesser works are seen all throughout film still to this day. I think the Sight and Sound list is the #1 reference point for this. Their names appear on this list quite frequently and also are ranked amongst the highest. And of course, with Orson Welles and Alfred Hitchcock most often taking that top spot on the list. But if I had to pick one person, I think it would be Hitchcock's contributions to cinema cannot be overstated. When looking through these three categories and through the works that he created, he helped inspire all of the great directors we still talk about. He is far and away the most studied and referenced director of all time. Without Hitchcock's extremely long career and the films that he left behind, it's hard to say what cinema would be if it were not for Alfred Hitchcock. Guys, the fun thing about the GOAT debate is that it's a debate, so please let me know if I got this wrong. I want to keep making videos like this, so please subscribe, stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.